Hello, figments of my imagination. Since the Modern Horizon 3 leaks dropped, one card has consumed most of my focus. And no, it's not Ugin's Labyrinth. I've found myself theorizing deck lists and brainstorming interactions constantly, day and night. My obsession has even kept me up a few nights. You could say it's like some sort of recurring night. Chthonian Nightmare is the latest entry in Wizards' lineup of what if we repented old busted cards, but gave them a few downsides. Here, they decided to use energy to limit what you could return, and significantly more importantly, they gave it an ETB trigger, so your opponent can destroy it before your first activation. Noticeable drawbacks for sure, but the card is very clearly still worth playing, and could potentially be a modern powerhouse. They even made it a mana cheaper to compensate for the nerfs. So today, I'm going to go over 7 decks. 4 that are current modern decks with Nightmare added in, and 3 I made myself, leaning more towards a combo kill. Without further ado, let's get to the decks. The first deck is a standard Yawgmoth Chord deck with, obviously, Chthonian Nightmare added in. If you're not familiar with this deck, the goal is typically to get out a Yawgmoth and to generate advantage from him. The combo itself involves getting out 1 or 2 copies of Young Wolf, who has Undying, and with Yawgmoth's ability, you put a -1/-1 counter on him, it removes the +1/+1 counter from Undying, then you can put another one on him to draw another card. He dies, comes back, you repeat. Most lists include Blood Artist, or some sort of Blood Artist type effect. The goal obviously is you gain your life back so you can draw cards, and you kill them out with Yawgmoth. Chord of Calling acts as what Chord normally acts as. It tutors every piece of your combo, tutors almost every card in the deck since most of your deck is creatures. This was the first list I decided to try Nightmare in. I think it's extremely strong here. With just the 3 energy you get baseline, you can return every creature in the deck except Yawgmoth and Sheldred, but you also have enough 1-drops that you can easily get more than 3 energy after your first activation. Grist makes tokens, so you have plenty of chump to throw away to bring back real creatures. You have some nice utility creatures like the Fulminator Mage, you can just keep bringing it back and Wasteland lock them out of the game essentially. Haywire Might, so you can wreak havoc on any sort of artifact or enchantment based deck. And of course, Bowmasters has a lot of synergy with the Nightmare. It creates its own token, so you can sack the Orc token to bring back something more relevant. And yeah, obviously there's synergy with Young Wolf and Persist, and it just gives you more resilience in bringing back your Yawgmoth, and you can even bring back Grist, because he is a creature while dead. I only went with 3 copies, I'm not sure if that's right or not. Drawing multiples is kind of bad, unless you're like relying on it to win, and here it's kind of like an also-ran, like you don't need it to win. The other issue here is this deck is already heavily graveyard based, so it's kind of awkward to add more graveyard interacting cards. You don't like to get destroyed by the same counters. That being said, it's probably good enough. If it is really good, maybe you go up to 4 and cut 1 Cauldron, but Cauldron's really good. Anyways, that's the list. The sideboard's just a standard sideboard. I didn't put any thought into it. You can't really make sideboards before sets come out. So let's move on to the next list. Next we have a mono black scam list. Scam, for those who aren't familiar, is basically abusing the evoke elementals, typically Grief, with cards like Not Dead After All, which when they die they come back. So you evoke out the Grief, take a card from them, cast this in response to the evoke trigger, Grief dies, comes back, hits their hand again, and you're left with a 3/2 menace, typically on turn 1 for 1 mana. Pretty good. As for why running Nightmare in this deck, again, you have Bowmasters, a standard in most black decks these days. Very strong with Nightmare. Gives you a token that you can sack out. Like you can even, if they kill the Bowmaster, play the Nightmare, sack the token, get the Bowmaster back. Pretty good. The standard list I saw didn't include this. Lord Skitter. Nice little card advantage. Hits their graveyard. Generates bodies for the Nightmare. Grief, obviously, you can't bring it back with Nightmare originally, but after you bring back 1 2-drop, which the whole deck is 2 drops, except the Sewer King, but whatever. So you bring back like a Bowmaster, the next time you play it, you bring back a Grief. And bringing back a Grief just 1 time is already so brutal. Voidwalker's standard fare and is really good with Nightmare. You can use it more to steal even more of their cards. Bloodghast, I include a few copies of this because it works well with the rest of the deck. It's nice with Liliana, you can discard it, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's also really good with Nightmare. You play land, get back the Bloodghast, Nightmare it away, bring back something that's relevant. The rest of the list, pretty standard from what I've seen from other lists. You got Saga with a nice little 1-drop package here. Seems good, and I think Nightmare in this list I went with 4 because I think getting it out is going to be really strong. And you really want to get it every game, in this list at least. I think it helps because this is more of an old school, we used to call this like Smallpox deck. This kind of fits the same vibe. I mean, you don't run the Pox anymore, but you still have Rack, you still tear up their hand. And the problem with those decks was always you run out of gas and then you're both just top decking. So having a card like Chthonian Nightmare, this can just dominate the game on its own. And it can be hard for some decks to remove, so that's nice. Moving on. And our next list is another scam list, this one the more traditional red-black version. I believe this has fallen a little out of favor since Fury's banning, but I don't really keep up with the modern metagame as much as I used to. The gist is kind of the same. You still have the Grief and Not Dead After All package. You still have the Voidwalker and Orcish Bowmaster, all really good with the Nightmare. But red gives you Kroxa, nice little card advantage over a long game. Ragavan, who's obviously extremely good, and he plays well with Nightmare because we can steal their things and sack them to Nightmare if we need to. He's also a 1-drop, so it lets us build energy to more reliably bring back Grief. Red also gives us Fable the Mirror Breaker. If we actually flip this thing, it's insane with Nightmare. We make a copy of whatever, probably Grief for the maximum ribbons. After we attack with it, or even if we don't want to attack with it, we sack the copy to Nightmare, bring back something a little more permanent. Just a few removal spells, Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, Terminate, the usual kind of things. 4 Thoughtseize. Black decks, you really want to be tearing up their hand. 1 copy of Liliana. This is kind of a flex slot in most lists that I've seen. It could be Blood Moon, it could be anything really. It could be the 4th Nightmare, but I think 3 Nightmares is fine here. If we did want the 4th Nightmare, maybe we cut Liliana, maybe we cut the Kroxa, because the goal here is this is kind of like a late game threat with the escape and everything, gives you inevitability. But Nightmare kind of does that on its own. So yeah, that's that list. Alright, next one is sort of based off a list that's close to my heart. It still has the scam package, but it's mainly, well, it's not mainly a Stoneforge Mystic deck. This is kind of a little bit of everything, but it does feature one of the card I think is really good at the scam package, which is Satoru. He triggers, you draw the card whenever you either didn't cast something or didn't spend mana on it. So with Grief and Solitude, both of them from the same cycle, when you evoke them, you didn't spend any mana on it, so you get to draw a card, which replaces the card you pitched. And then even better, when you ephemerate them, or Not Dead After All of them, that counts again, you draw another card. Pretty strong interaction there. Goes a step further because that interaction also works with Nightmare. So even if you're just doing something useless with Nightmare, like, you know, sacking a Voidwalker to bring back another one or whatever, like that still is triggering your Satoru, you're still drawing cards. I'm not entirely happy with how this list is. I kind of want to get Bowmasters back in there in some amount, because I think it's extremely good with Nightmare, but this list is more of like a first draft. It's possible you don't want something like Not Dead After All. Maybe Ephemerates are just good enough. It includes a Stoneforge package, which in this case, I went with Assimilation Aegis to give you some removal with your Stoneforge. I think it's a good option to have. And 2 copies of Cryptic Coat. This works really well with Nightmare. Every time you put it in, you get to manifest a new creature, which could just be a land for all you care. Sack it to the Nightmare and bring back something that's relevant. Obvious exclusions are Batterskull and Kaldra. Either of these could be in the main deck, they could just be in the sideboard. It just depends on what metagame you expect. Yeah, and other than that, just standard Fatal Push, Prismatic Ending, to Fury so your opponent can't mess with your shenanigans, Troll for mana fixing, plus you could bring him back with Nightmare, I guess. If you built up enough energy. Not really sure you'd want to, but the options are there. Next up. Now we've entered into my decks. This one is a green-black deck that's focused on a combo kill. The combo here is pretty simple. We need to get Nightmare to cost 1 black mana. So to do that, we run Herald of the Pantheon and Cloud Key. Herald's obviously the better one. Every time we loop the Nightmare, we're going to gain a life off of it. Just means that even if we can't really find a kill, we still essentially get infinite life, which I'll explain in a second. Cloud Key is just a backup to have a little bit more redundancy. For the combo kill itself, we have 2 black 1-drops, Greedy Freebooter and Shambling Ghast, both of which, when they die, they make a treasure token. Freebooter makes a treasure token and scries, so we can dig through our whole deck, and the kill is either a Blood Artist or a Zolaport Cutthroat. Outcast Trailblazer is similar to the 2 treasure guys, it's just an extra option in case, I don't know, someone has something like Stony Silence. Weird thing to have main deck, but weirder things have happened. So anyways, just to explain the combo real quick. If you get any of these out, we'll say Greedy Freebooter. 2 copies of them total. They could be 1 in the graveyard, 1 in play. Doesn't really matter. Well, we do need something in the graveyard to bring back. We'll say we have 1 in the graveyard, 1 in play, and we have a Herald on the battlefield. We play the Nightmare. It costs us a single black mana. And then we pay 1 energy, sack the Freebooter to get the other Freebooter, which gives us a treasure token and puts Nightmare back in our hand. So we've spent 1 black mana, we've gained a treasure token, and a scry, 1 life from the Herald, and if we have Blood Artist out, they take 1 damage. We use the treasure token to replay the Nightmare and continue the loop until they die. So if we don't have the Blood Artist yet, Freebooter lets us scry every time it dies as well, so we can scry down to the Blood Artist, and we can just leave it on top, repeat the loop to gain infinite life, pass the turn if we have no way to draw it, and next turn play the Blood Artist and do it again, or if our opponent does anything, we can change the game from there. So that's the main kill. For enabling, we have Citrus Supplier, helps put things in the graveyard. That's all you really want to do with this deck. We have Grief, obviously an extremely strong card. Still good with Nightmare, especially in a deck with a bunch of 1-drops. So we can still loop it, we can tear apart their hand, which is what you want to do in a combo deck. You don't want them to interact with you. 2 copies of Gravecrawler. We have enough zombies that we should be able to reliably play this. We'll always have a body to sack to the Nightmare. And 1 copy of Eternal Witness. With Nightmare, it means that we can just bring back anything in our graveyard, but we obviously don't want too many of them because it's kind of slow. 4 Nightmare. So obviously it's the combo kill. We want to run 4 of it. 20 lands. Possibly too many. I just wanted to make it consistent with the milling and whatnot. Speaking of milling, we have Commune with the Gods. Not sure if this is the best option, but it's good that it can grab either a creature or an enchantment, which is both halves of our combo. And 4 copies of Unearth. This allows us to bring back one of our combo pieces if we need to. Honestly, I'm not convinced that this is really necessary. It's more of a holdover from earlier versions of the deck. The good thing is it does have cycling, so we can combo off, we scry to our win condition with Freebooter, and we can cycle Unearth to get the win condition and kill them. There's a lot of things this could be instead. Maybe this turns into something else. Very likely it turns into something else. Probably just Thoughtseize even, honestly. So that's the first one. Here's the second one. So I said 7 decks. I think I counted as 6.5 because this is basically the same as the last deck. But this is what I thought of first because I thought of synergies with Renegade Rallier and whatnot. We'll go over it. It's kind of the same deck. You still have the 2 1-drops you're going to kill with. You still have 2 different Blood Artists that you're going to kill with. You have Herald. Because you added white, we can replace Cloud Key with Starfield Mystic. A creature costs less. Does the same thing. White has a few other advantages. The main one is Grand Abolisher. Making sure your opponent can't do anything on your turn means that your Nightmare always gets to survive and you get to win the game. Still 2 Gravecrawler. There's still enough zombies to make it work. Grief, I cut a single copy because it's a little more awkward to play. Literally looking at the list now, I don't think that's right, so I'm changing it right now. Up to 4, down to 3. Renegade Rallier can bring back Nightmare if we need it to. Nightmare is obvious. Mana. Still Commune with the Gods. Still the best digging, I think. Unearth is significantly better in this version of the list because you can bring back Renegade Rallier. As long as he's in your graveyard, you can Unearth him, bring back the Nightmare, so you can bring back your entire combo with 1 Unearth. Yeah, I'm not sure how much better this version is. It's always awkward when you add a 3rd color, but you get better sideboard cards, potentially. Grand Abolisher could be really strong depending on the metagame. Rallier can give you some good resilience. So I'm not sure if I like this version more or less than the green-black version. Both of them are things I want to play around with when the set actually comes out. Now let's move on to the last deck. Alright, last and probably least, we have a Grissix version. This time the kill is an old modern staple. That's right, we went back to Pestermite Kiki. The Kiki, it's going to look awkward, but I'll explain everything in a minute. So we've got 4 Deceiver, 4 Pestermite, 3 Snapcasters, just decent card, gets good value off the Nightmare. Obviously we have the Nightmare. We have Consider to help dig, works with our Snapcaster, works with Nightmare. Fatal Push is just Fatal Push. Otherworldly Gaze helps dig a lot, especially in this deck. And we're going to need all that digging, which you'll see in a sec. Lands do matter, but I'll get to them in a second. I don't know why this isn't sorcery, but whatever. We have Fable of the Mirror Breaker, extremely strong card. Works well with Nightmare, especially if you flip it. 1 Grape Shot, you'll see why in a minute. Lorien Revealed, good card, helps you draw cards in late game, is a land early game. And 1 copy of Unearth. Alright, so the lands, we have standard fare, tri-lands, some shock lands, some basics, some fetches. Then we have 4 Lotus Field. Because the goal here is we play the Nightmare, we sack a Pestermite, and we return a Pestermite. Or Deceiver. Pestermite and Deceiver are interchangeable, so I'm just going to say Pestermite because Lorwyn's the best set. So we sack a Pestermite, get a Pestermite back, untap Lotus Field, and then use Lotus Field to replay the Nightmare and do it again. If we have Lotus Field, then we net 1 black mana every time, which means that eventually we have infinite mana of every color. We get infinite black mana, we use the black mana to play the Nightmare and generate, say, red or blue or whatever. So with our infinite mana, we can then dig to Kiki or Grape Shot. Both work, either one kills. Dimmer Aqueduct works similarly. We don't net any mana off of it, but we still get infinite storm count with Nightmare, so it's still a kill with Grape Shot. Possible that it's not necessary, I just feel like 1 extra copy helps hedge. Maybe I end up cutting it. So I really like this list. You can still do like other things, like you can just play a Lotus Field on 3. Like if you play Lotus Field with 3 mana up, and you can actually just float 3 mana, play the Lotus Field, sack the 2 lands, then play a Pestermite to untap the Lotus Field, and then like go off from there, like just tap it, play the Nightmare, and just start chaining. Or you can just like have the Lotus Field up for if you, like maybe there's a way to add counters in here, or I think there's probably a version of this where you lean more into the twin era. The main reason I like this list is because you're not all in on the graveyard strategy like with every other list that I have here. You can just play a Kiki game. I don't like that I ended up cutting a lot of the interaction So there's probably like a build that's better, but again, that's harder to do when you don't know what the metagame's going to look like after the new set. I don't know if this is the strongest list. It might be my favorite, though, just because it's such a weird, out there take. But that's it. 7 lists using Nightmare. I feel like there's probably a lot more it can slot into. You can slot it into almost any list, and it will, I assume it will spread its own lists when it actually comes out. Maybe combo is not the way to go. I just always lean myself into combo decks. I love them. That's it. Go ahead and yell at me in the comments. Let me know how terrible all these decks are, or if you see somewhere else that Nightmare fits really well, let me know. And I will see you all eventually.